Hello, and welcome to the So You Want to Be a Marine Biologist podcast, where we learn about the ocean, share sea stories, and explore ocean careers. I'm your host, Kara Muzia. Let's dive into today's episode. This episode is brought to you by you. Thank you to those of you who have become patrons of the So You Want to Be a Marine Biologist podcast. For less than the cost of a dive tank refill, or a cup of coffee, you can help keep the podcast episodes coming. There's also some fun bonuses for patrons, so be sure to check those out at patreon.com/marinebiolife. That's patreon.com/marinebiolife. Hello, mermaids, pirates, ocean lovers, and land lovers. Welcome to today's show. I have a listener-supplied joke for you today. Have you heard the whale joke? It's a real kriller. Why are blue whales blue? Because they have blue genes. Science writer, marine scientist, and published author Juli Berwald joins us on the show today. Starting with an undergrad in mathematics, Juli's career bloomed into a PhD in marine science before turning to science writing. Her work has been featured in National Geographic Magazine, Oceanus, Redbook, Wired.com, and the New York Times. Her latest book, Spineless, dives deep into the world of jellyfish. Reading this book, I personally learned lots of surprising details about this ethereal creature. In today's episode, Juli shares how one snorkel trip made her math major make sense and completely change the trajectory of her life. We chat about the merits of getting a master's and a PhD degree, and Juli takes us back to her college days conducting flow tank experiments in an underground swimming pool below a college basketball court. We also chat about ocean acidification and what it means, how to become a published author, and, of course, all about jellies, including what to do if you get stung. Please enjoy. Juli, welcome to the So You Want to Be a Marine Biologist podcast. I'm so excited to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me, Kara. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So you have had a really cool career. You've been a marine biologist and you've become a writer. What got you into marine biology in the first place?
I was never really into biology. When I went to college, I was sort of one of those people who liked everything. And I had a roommate who was just an incredible writer. Her name's Margaret Stoll. She's actually written like a dozen books now. She's mostly a young adult writer. And she was such a good writer that she intimidated me like away from the whole humanities side of the world. and I became a math major, just almost out of fear, like not wanting to compete with someone who was such a great writer. And then when I was a junior, I went to Israel for a study abroad program. And I did all these things out of fear. It's very, when I say it like this, but I was miserable basically in Israel. And I saw this like notice on the wall for a marine ecology course down in Eilat, which is in the Red Sea, which is kind of the northern tip of the Indian Ocean. And I was like, anything for a change. So I signed up for the course and went down to the Red Sea, and they basically like slapped a mask on our face and gave us some fins and said, go look. And I stuck my face in the water and saw this coral reef, and I couldn't believe that I lived on the same planet with that, that incredible beauty and complexity and just life. And I got out of the water and we went into our first lecture, and it was the Laca-Volterra equations, which are like these equations that explain about population sizes, what makes populations grow and shrink. And I was like, math actually applies to biology? Like, what? And I suddenly felt like, oh, the whole reason I was a math major has become clear. And I just, from that moment on, I wanted to figure out how to learn more biology and use the math that I'd been studying to understand biology better. So that was really the story of getting into it.
That's awesome. I love that one snorkel trip. And I read that in your book as well. Just one snorkel trip just totally changed how you viewed your career and your current degree and kind of changed the trajectory of where you were going.
It really, yeah. Isn't that weird? Just one little thing. I think about that all the time, how one thing can change so much that comes after.
It's poetic, actually.
Yeah, it's also like basically the plot of many movies. But like
it's true. It's true. But movies are based off of real life a lot of times.
Yeah, right. That's true.
Can't make some stuff up. So so what came after this pivotal experience for you?
Yeah, so I went back to college and I couldn't switch my major to biology because I was already a senior. And so I decided what I wanted to do was biomechanics.
Mm-hmm.
And because that was math and biology mixed together. And so I got myself a summer job at the Marine Biological Lab in Woods Hole, mm-hmm. in the marine ecology summer course. And, for anyone who is thinking about becoming a marine biologist, I mean, not right now, because we're sort of, who knows what's going to happen this summer, but those summer courses at Marine Biology Labs, I think, are fantastic opportunities to just really dive in if you could make that happen for yourself. Mm-hmm. I couldn't sign up for the course, so I was basically like the dishwasher and coffee maker for the course. But it was amazing. I got to sit in on all the lectures, and I met all these graduate students in marine biology, so I got to find out what that was like. And I went back to college my senior year. So I did that between my junior and senior year. My senior year, like I said, I couldn't change my major, so I talked this biology professor into letting me do an independent study on coral and biomechanics my whole senior year. And I found this, I went to Amherst College, which is this small liberal arts college in Massachusetts, and they didn't have any marine biology classes or anything. Mm-hmm. But I found that there was this old flow tank in the bottom of a building that used to be a gym, like the place where they had basketball and water polo. Like that's where they played their events, their games there, where people was. So there were risers, and then there was this floor which when it was closed was a basketball floor, and when it was open was a water polo pool. And it was drained, the pool was drained, and in the bottom of the pool were these flow tanks. And so there was like a way you could crawl between the basketball floor and the swimming pool, like walk down the steps of the swimming pool and get to these flow tanks. And I set up these experiments in there about how fast water diffused around corals, and I put coral skeletons in and injected them with dye and did these timing experiments and stuff. I was trying to figure out like flow rates around corals. And
that's awesome. So I'm envisioning you literally just in a college gymnasium with the basketball floors like closed over you, so you're kind of in a cave playing with flow tanks and corals.
Yeah, in like basically the deep end of what used to be a swimming pool.
That is awesome.
So I did that, and that was really good. And it gave me like some experience with experiments and failing, which I did a lot.
It's important.
Yeah, failing is hugely important. And then I applied to grad school and I didn't get in. Well, actually, that's not true. And the whole story is that I freaked out. And I was like, I can't be a marine biologist. No one's a marine biologist. And so I got myself a job as an accountant with a big Big Six firm. And I did that for like 8 months. And I realized my soul was being sucked out of my body. And I came home one day and I was like curled up in a fetal position on the floor of my apartment. And my roommate walked in and she was like, you need to go be a marine biologist. So then I started applying to grad school, and it was very difficult for me to get into grad school. I don't know if it's as difficult today as it was then. But I couldn't I really didn't get in right away at all. And I didn't have a biology degree. Like I said, I had a math degree, and I'd done like a few, I mean, good thing that I'd done a few of these little courses because I could sort of.
I mean, you could put Woods Hole on your resume.
Yeah, I could.
For something.
Yeah, and I could put that independent study thing I did on my resume too. But, I guess it almost felt like, and I'm not sure if it's the same way, and maybe you know more, you had to almost have a connection to someone to get into grad school. Like you had to have a professor who you worked with as an undergraduate to tell you, oh, go talk to this professor in grad school, and maybe they'll get you into their lab.
I do know for grad school now, it does help if you have a prior connection, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like you worked with them in your undergrad. It could be you like their research, and so you've communicated with them about it, and then kind of showed your interest in their work and said, I'd really like to come work with you as a grad student. And it's kind of like it's an agreement between you guys, and then you apply to that school to work with that professor. It's kind of one of the ways that I've heard now is how to get in.
Yeah, and I think that was very similar then. So I needed connections. And so I got myself another job at Woods Hole with a professor who eventually gave me an assistantship at the University of Southern California. It was like half of an assistantship. So I was making, and I think like you nuts and bolts wise, like I think it was like a $10,000 a year job. It was but it was more than anything else I had. Right. So I went, and I got to him through a contact at the Marine Biological Lab. So I drove out to LA. I was still in Massachusetts. I drove out to LA, and
it's a heck of a drive.
Yeah, it was a heck of a drive. And then I started working for this. I was living in these decrepit places with cockroaches everywhere, and but I started working in his lab, and he did some marine ecology modeling, so my math was coming in handy. And while I was there, I applied to grad school for biomechanics, and I didn't get in. But I met another professor at USC whose name is Dale Kiefer, and we just clicked. Like it was amazing. Like our personalities clicked. We just started talking about, he also does modeling, marine ecology modeling. And it was just super easy to talk to him and to work with him. And so he accepted me. We made this agreement, like you're saying, he accepted me into his lab, and then I applied and got in at USC. So that's the kind of longest I've ever told that story, but that's how it happened.
Hey, Kara here. I hear it all the time. How do I become a marine biologist? Or my niece wants to help the ocean. Where does she even start? I hear from students, yes, and also nurses, HR professionals, and other mid-career folks who wonder if they could still make their dream of working with sea turtles or sharks come true, wondering if it's too late to answer the ocean's call. Here's what I've learned after 20 years in the field and hundreds of interviews. There's no straight line, no magic degree, and no gatekeeper. You create the path forward. If this sounds overwhelming and vague, I've created 2 tools to help you stop wondering what if and start moving forward with clarity and purpose. The first is my free guide, Be a Marine Biologist Without the Degree. Over 1,000 people have already downloaded this guide and taken their first step towards ocean impact. Inside, you'll find 7 concrete, doable actions to help you get started, whether you're just exploring or ready to make a change. Then there's the Ocean Blueprint. This is a 30-day self-paced course that helps you build your unique path into ocean science and conservation without quitting your job or going back to school. Inside the Ocean Blueprint, you'll get daily prompts to explore your interests, skills, and next steps, a structure that turns overwhelm into real momentum, and a bonus section to root your work into ocean connection. You don't have to wait for a degree, a perfect plan, or permission. Whether you're wading in or ready to take the deep dive, these tools are here to help you move from dreaming to doing. The ocean called. Are you ready to answer? Links in the show notes and on my website, karagracemuzia.com. I can't wait to see the waves you'll make. Yeah, I mean, it was very illustrative, and I think it's good for people to realize that grad school isn't always a straight path. Like, I graduate from my undergrad, and while I'm graduating, I apply for grad school, and that's just what I do. It takes some time to figure out, and you don't always jump into it right away. So
yeah, and I might say one more thing. I mean, and this is sort of the truth of the matter. Like, it's really important, I think, that you do click with your advisor if you go to grad school. I mean, I know tons of stories of people from my own grad school experience who didn't get along great with their advisors, and it's a very close relationship you have with them. Mm-hmm. They are, basically they hold the keys to your future in a lot of ways. So I'm really happy. I think that if there is a way to sort of intern or work with or spend some sort of field season with someone before you commit, it's probably a good thing. It seems like it might slow you down, but in the end, I think it's pretty important. And like, I just actually had a Skype call with Dale yesterday. Mm-hmm. And even though I'm not doing research anymore, like, we just fall right back into talking about science and what he's doing. And it's one of the most rewarding relationships I've had in my life, probably. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Great advice. So what were you doing for your graduate degree? What were you studying? You said models with Dale.
Yeah, so I couldn't do biomechanics, which is what I really wanted to do. And but Dale worked on satellite. He was working, well, he was a photosynthesis person. Mm-hmm. And we were working on, he had been very influential in discovering that when phytoplankton photosynthesize, so in the ocean, there's no trees or anything, so all of the photosynthesis is largely done by these single-celled plankton that are basically have a little chloroplast or have a bunch of chloroplasts in them and can take the sun's energy and carbon dioxide and make sugar out of it. And it's just this sort of, I mean, the idea that happens is to me brilliant. But along the way, it turns out that this was a time when we were getting our first satellite images of the ocean. And it was before that, the way that we calculated how much photosynthesis was going on in the ocean was we would go out in a boat and take a bottle, like take these long cables and drop them down into the ocean. And at certain places along the cables, there were these bottles called Niskin bottles, and you could trip them electronically and they would snap closed, capturing the water at whatever depth the bottle was at. And then you haul those back up and you you open them up carefully and you get water out of them, and then you filter that water. And on the filter, you'd capture all those phytoplankton, and then you'd measure them to see how much chlorophyll was in there. And chlorophyll was a measure of how much photosynthesis was going on. I hope that wasn't too complicated. Or you could actually use radioactivity to measure how much oxygen was made or how much sugars were made to exactly know how much photosynthesis was on. But the problem was it was like a dot across the ocean, because you're having to stop your boat, measure, then move somewhere else, stop your boat, measure. But with satellites, we got this like view of the ocean, it was like this map. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden you could see just how complicated the ocean was, with all these eddies and currents and rivers coming in, and all of that influenced the complex, how much photosynthesis was going on. And so it was just this really exciting time. And we were trying to come up with equations to go from those satellite pictures of the ocean to photosynthesis. And it was actually, the question we were trying to answer was how much carbon dioxide is photosynthesis pulling out of the atmosphere. So it was at a time when we already knew climate change was an issue. And this was in the 90s. I mean, it was just not even controversial at all. And the question was, how much can the oceans help us absorb carbon dioxide to, counteract all the carbon dioxide we're putting in from burning fossil fuels? And so I was working on equations to kind of interpret those satellite images.
Amazing. It's amazing that you're doing that in the 90s, and I feel like a lot of that is still going on.
Yeah, well, the story is actually, I think it's kind of interesting. So we were doing that, and then Dale, he had a sabbatical, and he went to Italy to work at FAO, which is the Food and Agricultural Organization. They do a lot of really cool fisheries research, and so if you're someone who's interested in fisheries, FAO is a great resource. It's a United Nations agency. So Dale got a job to kind of combine these satellite images with some of the fisheries work. And I ended up going to Italy and living with his family over the summers. And in Italy, it was, in Europe, there was no controversy over climate change. So it was just like in the United States in the early 90s. But I remember coming back after one summer, like it was the fall of, I think, like 96. And all of a sudden, climate change was called into question here in the United States. And I was like, what? Really? Like, I didn't see that science. Like, where did that come from? And it was just, now I understand that it was this misinformation campaign starting. But at the time, I was like, well, maybe there was some science I wasn't aware of, or I was just very, very confused by it.
Right.
And still in Europe, there was no questions. Like, it was still very well accepted in Europe. So it's interesting. I still think back on those times as this strange times.
Yeah. It kind of the beginning of a diversion almost.
Yeah, exactly.
So now, was this, you were working at USC with Dale, you were working on your master's, or was this working all the way towards your PhD?
Yeah, I just decided to work on directly to my PhD. And again, I want to say, I don't know if that was the smartest move. I mean, like I said, luckily Dale and I really clicked, and so that was great. But I think the master's, and I don't think I think I was always kind of like a little bit of an overachiever, and so I'm like, I don't need a master's. But I think the master's is actually extraordinarily useful in marine science. And I want to say that a lot of my friends from grad school who got masters ended up doing really, really interesting things. And I might have a
couple of examples.
Yeah, like one of them, she started a nonprofit, or she doesn't, she's the executive director of a nonprofit of like a prairie conservation group she left that job recently, but she was the executive director of a prairie conservation group. She lives in Illinois. And so does like really cool things, lobbying the government for extended protections of prairie lands. And then she just moved to Nebraska because her husband got a new job, and now she's the executive director of the Audubon in Nebraska. I don't know if it's just in Lincoln, but a large region around Lincoln. So she does really cool things with her life. Another one of my friends was an inspiration for me to become a science writer, and he also left with a master's. He now is the head of the science writing program at Stanford University. So another friend of mine, he got his master's in marine science, but then decided he wanted to be a physical therapist, and now owns a really successful physical therapy clinic in Seattle. So, he fell off the marine biology path, but I think to some extent, masters allow you to really understand the field and be a little more flexible in what you decide to do in the field. I don't know.
I agree. And I think that what PhDs carry a lot of weight, and they can almost overqualify you for some positions, particularly field positions.
Yeah.
Like, well, we just need somebody to go out in the field and collect data. You have a PhD. It seems like a lot.
Yeah, PhD is a huge slog also. I mean, it takes at least 7 years. You know, and again, like I ended up falling out of academia, so I have maybe a different perspective on the PhD. But and so I think that anyone who's listening should take that with a grain of
Right.
salt, you know. But I mean,
what were some things that the PhD did open up for you? I mean, you've done a lot of science writing, and I feel like your degree helped get your foot in the door, at least with that, because having those 3 letters behind your name does carry weight.
It does carry weight. That is true. And I mean, I think that when I do interviews, you know, one of the things I love about being a science writer now is talking to scientists. I mean, I love science. I find science just the most fascinating thing in the world. And I find the marine science the most fascinating thing. So, you know, and I will say, like, the thing I love is talking to scientists and finding out about their research and what they're doing. And so I think sometimes when I say, yeah, I have a PhD, it does allow scientists to talk to me more freely. They're not holding back in terms of the complexity of their work. And that is extraordinarily useful for me now. So yes, there is that. That is huge. I don't know if the fact that I have a PhD helped me like publish my book very much, but yeah, I think, you know, like I said, I think it's mostly that during interviews I can get great information from scientists.
Awesome. So speaking of your book, what inspired you to write about jellies?
The story is, so I felt, like I said, I fell out of academics and I started writing textbooks, and then I sort of chanced into this little job writing some pieces for National Geographic. And they asked me to sort of fact check this story on ocean acidification that Elizabeth Colbert wrote. And she is the person who wrote The Sixth Extinction, which won a Pulitzer Prize. So she's an incredible science writer. But in that story, there was a graphic and it said winners and losers in a future acidified world. And let me just back up and say what ocean acidification is. Yes. Carbon dioxide in our atmosphere doesn't just hold heat. It also mixes with water at the surface of the ocean. And when it does, it makes the ocean a little more acidic. The ocean's pH has historically been around 8.3, which is actually a little alkaline. It's already at 8.2, which is more acidic, and it's expected to go down. And the pH scale is kind of like a Richter scale. So every point, you know, every change is an exponential change. It's a much bigger change. So what you'll see is that like the ocean is 30% more acidic now than it used to be. And acid can dissolve shells or kind of chemically make it harder for animals that have shells to build their shells. So in this graphic, it said that things with shells like mollusks and coral and echinoderms, sea stars, would have, I think there was something else, I can't remember in the graphic, anyway, would have a harder time building their shells. But it said that things without shells, like kelp and phytoplankton and jellyfish, would be fine, and they would be winners in this future acidified ocean. And I was like, I'm okay with the things that photosynthesize, because actually they do better in more acidic conditions. But what about those jellyfish? And so I dove into the scientific literature. And that's another thing having a PhD does, is it helps you not be afraid of scientific literature. And I dove in and I discovered there were like really only 2 experiments on jellyfish, and they were sort of ambiguous. Like you couldn't tell if more acidity was better or worse for the jellyfish.
Mm-hmm.
And I also discovered there was this huge fight raging among the jellyfish scientists about what the future for jellyfish was, not just because of ocean acidity, but because of all these other things we were doing to the ocean, like overfishing it.
Mm-hmm.
The warming was causing more low oxygen zones, which jellyfish seem to tolerate better. The warming itself caused some jellyfish to reproduce faster. And all of the coastal development was providing habitat for one part of a jellyfish's life cycle called the polyp.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were like, not like in sort of like the formal language of scientific literature, the scientists were screaming at each other. And I was like, what is happening here? And I just couldn't stop looking into the story of jellyfish after that.
I love that it's another one of those moments that just kind of like sucked you in and changed.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So, I mean, I learned so much reading your book about jellyfish. It was really fascinating read, and I've recommended it to a few friends and they've enjoyed it. And they're not marine scientists, they just wanted a book to read. And I was like, well, I just read this one.
Oh, thank you. That's cool.
So like a few crazy facts that I learned was jellyfish may be the oldest animal on the planet.
Possibly, yeah. I mean,
possibly.
And so we should be a little careful. So they're comb jellies, and they get to, so they're kind of like a wildly different phylum from the typical jellyfish,
Yes.
but ecologically they really always get clumped in together because they're gelatinous and they eat plankton, and they seem to reproduce in wildly explosive fashion. Just so jellyfish do all those things in the ecosystem also. But these comb jellies, like, yeah, if you haven't seen them, Google comb jelly, and they're so beautiful. They're like, they swim with these combs. Basically, they're cilia, but that's why they have the name comb jelly, because they have these rows of cilia, and they diffract the light kind of the same way that the back of a CD, if anyone remembers what CDs look like. But they use the same, basically, technology to break the light apart into its many rainbow colors. So, yeah, they're crazy beautiful.
They are really beautiful. And it's because people usually think anything jelly in the ocean, it will sting you. And it's one of my favorite things, like pick them up and have people freak out.
Yeah. And what's cool is they do have like an explosive cell, the same as jellyfish do, but at the end of it is sort of like I think of it as like like a suction cup stopper with glue on the end of it. So they actually like suction cup onto the zooplankton that they eat, and then kind of reel them in. I think about it as like those cartoons where like people shot those arrows with suction cups and then anyway. But they're voracious. Let me just say they are voracious. They're like some of the biggest predators in the sea, and they can clear like a whole ocean basically of all the zooplankton rather quickly when their numbers get high. So,
which may be why they've lasted so long.
Yeah, and they're also hermaphrodites. So you just need one to get a swarm, which is kind of cool.
That's cool. I think it's fun how many things in the ocean are hermaphrodites.
Yeah. It's true. Coral are all hermaphrodites as well, which I didn't really, they can't self-fertilize. So they need two to have reproduction, but there's one coral, I was just in the Dominican Republic for the coral spawn this year, and there's a coral that all the scientists there called Romeo because he was such a big spawner. He was really just prolific with his spawn.
Okay.
But Romeo turned into Juliet this year.
Awesome. So is Juliet as prolific with her spawning?
Well, actually, it's even more interesting. Only the top half is Juliet and the bottom half is still Romeo.
Wow. So
I
can they
know.
release both gametes at the same time?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
really cool.
I know. But I don't know the answer if Juliet is as prolific.
Okay. Well, it's pretty impressive that Romeo and Juliet can be one and the same. And
Isn't that cool?
yes, corals are fascinating, which
Yeah.
I'm going to get to.
Sorry, yeah, I jumped
For
there.
sure. Yeah, no, that's okay. So another thing we learned that their nematocysts, which is their little firing, stinging cells that most people are afraid of, can move at like 5 million Gs, which I'm not even sure how to put that into perspective.
I don't either. I don't know how to, there's some super cool videos though of high speed cameras that are catching the stinging cells deploy. It's worth checking out. I can, if you want, I don't know if you'll have show notes, but I can send you a link afterwards.
Yeah, that'd be great. I do have show notes.
Yeah, and it's just amazing to see them fire and to think that something we think of as rather primitive has this extraordinary sophisticated, weapon basically that does everything for it. It captures its food and it defends itself, and it's probably so sophisticated that this one part of the jellyfish is, I don't know, anatomy, I guess, has allowed the jellyfish to maintain its sort of simple form for all these millions of years. And I'm like, I bow in awe of the stinging cell, I guess. It's really amazing.
It truly is incredible. Their eyes totally fascinated me.
Oh my gosh, their eyes. I know.
So could you kind of explain a little bit about jellyfish eyes and why one, they have eyes, which most people don't realize, and two, what they function as on the jellyfish?
Yeah, so when you're like, if you're ever at an aquarium and you're looking at jellyfish, what you'll see is sort of around the edge of the bell, you'll see almost scallops. It's sort of scalloped. And so where two scallops come together, like where it kind of goes up, if you look very closely, you'll see this sort of intensified, thing there. And that's an organ, and it holds the jellyfish's basic face. And so there's something called a touch plate on it, which is like ciliated. It has a lot of cilia, and those cilia can sense water currents. They can also kind of basically taste the water. They can taste for chemicals in the water. And then there's like eye spots. There's some light sensing regions on the Rhopalia also. And there's a thing called a pacemaker there too, which controls how fast the jellyfish squeezes its bell closed and open. So all of those sensory organs are in one place, and they're and also, sorry, there's one more thing. There's like a statocyst, so it's this sort of circular pocket with a little pebble inside of it. Basically, it's a pocket made out of nerves, and it's got a pebble, and wherever the pebble rests, that is how the jellyfish knows where down is. And so that's kind of like the way our inner ears work. So I kind of went a little too far, but I think it's okay. So all of that is on these Rhopalia, and then there's several of them in multiples of 4. So like the typical moon jelly, which is the most common jelly you'll see in aquaria, which has kind of the clover on top, it has 8 Rhopalia, but some of jellyfish have 32 of them or whatever. So you can think about jellyfish as having many, many faces looking out into the world and integrating all that information in, and that's how they respond to their environment. But getting to the eye part, on a moon jelly, there's not a whole lot of focus or anything like that. Each Rhopalia has 2 eye spots on it on a moon jelly, and they probably are only capable of seeing some shadows and some light and dark. So jellyfish are definitely respond to light and dark very well. They seem to respond to shadows. They definitely respond to shear currents. So they have complicated responses to things. But the box jellies, which are sort of one group of jellyfish, which they only have 4 repelia, but each one of their repelia has 6 eyes on it. And 4 of those eyes are kind of like just those light sensing eyes, like what I described for the moon jellyfish. But 2 of them actually have lenses and irises and retinas, just like our eyes do, which is absolutely extraordinary. And in fact, if you take and you dim the lights on one of these box jellyfish, its iris will open up to let in more light. And if you put bright light on it, its iris will contract to dim the light. Just like ours do. And this is the craziest part, that the lens is sort of like a round, like a marble. It's like a clear marble. Mm-hmm. And if you would think about making, like the way a marble's made, all of the material in a marble is equally distributed everywhere. There's it's just kind of uniform. If you create a lens like that, it won't focus the light into a point. But in the jellyfish's lens, it's actually packed. There's it's packed more heavily towards the center and less heavily towards the outside, which actually allows the light to be focused down to a single point. And so, but the problem is the jellyfish's retina is not where that point focuses. It's actually in front of it. So there's like this huge mystery, like why would you spend the time creating a perfect lens if you can't take advantage of it? Mm-hmm. And also, how can a jellyfish even interpret an image that comes through a lens, because it doesn't have a very complicated brain? So there's all these amazing questions about jellyfish eyes that, we still don't know answers to, but yeah, they have really good eyes and it's amazing. And that's another cool thing to Google. I'll try to make a note to send, but if you Google like box jellyfish swimming, they swim like fish. They dive around poles. They can see and interpret where they're swimming. It's phenomenal.
That really isn't phenomenal.
Yeah.
I like that you bring up box jellies, because that was one of the other points, is that they're actually one of the most toxic animals on the planet.
They are. Yeah. I mean, so jellyfish hold this place like in my psyche, I think, as like angel and devil. Like they are absolutely stunningly beautiful to look at. They're just extraordinarily gorgeous swimmers. They seem to sort of float angelically in the water. But they are the most potentially toxic animal in the world. There's a couple jellyfish. Well, there's one jellyfish that mostly lives near Australia and sort of like Indonesia, the Philippines. That's said to be able to kill a person in 3 minutes. So
2 minutes, is that what you said?
If you're ever swimming in those waters, 3 minutes, yeah.
3 minutes.
3 minutes, yeah. And they're very small. They're the size. Oh, well, they're not that small. They're like a softball size. So, okay. Yeah. But yeah, so if you're swimming in those waters, you should wear a stinger suit. And they tend to respond they're very sensitive to like the moon and the sun. They probably come up to the surface to mate with each other. So pay attention to local conditions and talk to the lifeguards about, if it is a box jelly season or not. That's very important. And then one last thing, I guess, while we're on the topic of stinging, when I was writing the book, there was a lot of controversy about what you should do for jellyfish stings. Mm-hmm. Since the book was published, it's become rather clear. There's better guidelines on that. And so the 2 things that will disable a jellyfish sting or lessen it are vinegar and heat. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to a beach and you're concerned about that, bringing like one of those instant heat things with you, if you could pack that, and then a little bottle of vinegar are two really good things to just kind of have handy.
Great advice. Don't pee on the jellyfish thing.
Yeah, the pee is warmish, but yeah, vinegar and heat are two things that, even for box jelly stings, seem to be recommended now.
Okay, great advice. Thank you for sharing that. So your research for your book took you all over the world. I mean, you were in the US to go jelly ball fishing. And but you also went back to Israel, to Japan, back to Italy. What were some of your highlights from each place?
Well, it was really fun to go back to a lot of the places I had gone in grad school to write the book. And I think part of the book was kind of coming to the terms that I did fall off the academic path, because I felt a lot of guilt about that. And I think I needed to sort of reckon with my past in some ways. And so going back to these places and talking to the scientists who work there about jellyfish sort of had this other ulterior motive, like this personal motive of dealing with who I used to be and who I thought I was going to be when I was in grad school, and then who I turned out to be. And so, yeah, so those personal things were interesting to me, you know, just being back in Woods Hole and having the feeling of, wow, this place meant so much to me at one point in my life, was really powerful. You know, that I got to talk to people about robotic jellyfish there was like icing on the cake. And then, you know, Japan was certainly like trying to see the giant jellyfish was just this amazing sort of adventure. And I felt like I was living out a little bit of like, oh, if National Geographic would have really hired me, this is the kind of thing I would have done. But like,
I definitely felt like I was on a Nat Geo adventure with you.
Yeah, I mean,
in the book.
Right. But you know, what was the most interesting about that was I had like all these like ideas in my mind, like I'm going to get in the water with the giant jellyfish and get to photograph it. And then that became impossible because we really needed these industrial nets from a big fishing boat to get to see the giant jellyfish. And then, you know, once we pulled it up and put it on the back of the boat, I felt, I know everyone's probably had this, I don't know, but I think everyone's had this feeling of like, you know, you've got this thing you're in search of or this expectation. I mean, even a birthday can sometimes feel this way where like, oh, it's going to be so great. And then you get there and it's just kind of not as great as you had envisioned or had hoped or thought. And that's what it felt like when we got the giant jellyfish. And I don't know how much of that was mixed with like sort of sadness that it was dying also. You know, intellectually, I know that this jellyfish probably only had a couple more months anyway, because they only live about 6 months as Medusa. And it probably had already spawned. So like evolutionarily it had done its business, but I still felt, it just didn't feel anything like what I was thinking it was going to feel. So that was pretty interesting. Israel, well, I don't know if I want to ruin the whole book, but like, yeah, I mean, Israel was really weird because like I said, I had a terrible experience there and I really didn't want to go back. And then there was,
you had such a serendipitous experience in Israel.
Yeah.
I think that was probably the most, I mean, that had to have been your highlight of that trip.
Yeah, that was crazy. You know, like,
yeah,
there was this bloom of jellyfish that I had heard about. I'd seen on Facebook and Twitter. There was this huge bloom of jellyfish, and it's sort of a long story, but one of the kind of like growing a spine pieces of that book was me getting the story in the New York Times about the Suez Canal, which was going to be the jellyfish scientists in Italy told me this story about how the Suez Canal was being expanded and no environmental impact assessment was being done, in violation of like 4 international treaties.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized like no one was telling the story, and I had the ability to do it. So it was basically, I had to step into that role of saying, hey, look, this is not okay. And I pitched it to the New York Times, which was sort of intimidating. But they took the story and published it. And I thought, well, now something will be done. Some of these treaties will be enforced. But that was really naive of me. Treaties are often violated, and that's just, especially in the ocean. And that's a real big problem we still have today. Anyway, there was an invasive jellyfish that had probably already gone through the canal earlier, but that was now had sort of taken up residence in the Eastern Mediterranean, off the coast of Israel, and also Lebanon and Tunisia. And it's a bad stinger, and it clogs power plant intake machinery. And so this jellyfish was predicted to get worse as the canal was widened, and nothing was done to prevent the movement of invasive species from the Indian Ocean into the Mediterranean. So I was following the story, and it ended up my trip to Israel was coincident with this like huge bloom of this nomadic jellyfish. And I really wanted to see it, but like basically every beach I went to, people were like, oh, you just missed them. And so I had like one more day left. And anyway, I ended up driving up to this beach near Haifa, not even knowing what I was looking for, basically. And this one dude whose name I had ends up like standing up, like rising up out of the water, like a kind of like a rising sea monster with this giant camera. And I was like, well, I didn't know it was the dude at that point. I just saw this like diver like stand up out of this huge bloom of jellyfish. And I walk up to him and I'm like, are you Moti Mendelsohn? And he's like, yeah, how did you know my name? And it was like I knew one person's name in all of Haifa, and he like happened to like rise up out of the water right in front of me. At the
There's
very
all these
moment
circumstances that got you to that moment, to that exact point in time that did and didn't happen. So yeah, I think that was one of my favorite parts of the storytelling in the book. I mean, the jellyfish facts are just unreal, and we barely scratched the surface with them, but just the serendipitous moment of like you finding those jellies in Israel. It's like, wow.
It was crazy. It still feels crazy to me. And I think one of the things that I just kind of hold on to about that moment, because it is weird. Like the beach, I should say, like the Haifa beach is 15 or 20 miles long. It's huge. And I just happened to pull over and park in this one spot where like he ends up coming up out of the water at that same moment. Anyway, I think one of the cool things about that story, and this is, I think when you start looking for something, if you don't ever go looking, you're never going to find it. Yeah. So like, that's kind of the message that sticks with me, is like, things will go wrong. And that kind of moment is probably never ever going to happen to me again in my life. But if I hadn't have gone looking, that moment would have never happened. Mm-hmm. So like, if you want something, you have to at least go looking. That's the first thing you have to do along the way. So I don't know. I hope that came across in the book. That
yes.
Yeah, okay, good.
Yeah. No, I love it. So yeah. I have a couple questions from listeners. Actually, one of them is who recommended your book to me. Okay. She's interested in being a science writer as well, and she's curious kind of what the path was to get to where you wrote Spineless. And from reading the book and from what you've just said, it just sounded like it was a path of curiosity to build this book. Did you already have like a book deal before that, or you kind of wrote it because this is something that you felt you needed to write and then kind of found something after that?
Yeah. Okay. So, I hope I'm not. Well, what happened was I was writing. Like I said, I had fallen off the academic path and become a writer, and I had a few magazine gigs I was working on,
Mm-hmm.
and this one. Well, this photographer from National Geographic named David Lichwager had asked me to write a book. It was a photography book.
Okay.
And I've always been like a huge reader. And I think I always like imagined writing a book would be like way something that I could never do. Like I told you how intimidated I was by my roommate in college.
Right.
And a book just seemed like more than I was capable of. But then David asked me to write this book, and I sat down and I wrote the first chapter, and I really, I put everything I had into it, and I didn't hear back about it, and finally his publisher contacted me and said, you know what, we're gonna have people who are more famous than you write this book. And so, but in that moment, I kind of realized, you know what, I was 43. I think if I'm ever gonna write a book, now's the time.
Yeah.
So I think that when I came across the jellyfish story, I was looking for a story. I was looking for a story that was big enough to be a book.
Okay.
And so I started basically just writing it. The way that you get a nonfiction book sold is by writing what's called a book proposal. Mm-hmm. And it can take on many forms, but basically you have to have a couple chapters written. You have to have an outline for the book. It's better if you have some sort of marketing plan, or you have to, you include what the market for the book is. You can look online and there's examples of book proposals, but that's how you get a nonprofit book sold. And that's different from a fiction book where you have to have the whole thing written. Mm-hmm. So I knew I wanted to at least get to the point of writing a book proposal. So I did some research, as I talk about in the book, like every family vacation became a jellyfish vacation. Mm-hmm. And I also started treating it like Elizabeth Gilbert has a really cool TED Talk, I think, about creativity. Mm-hmm. And how you have to kind of have a relationship with your creativity where you nurture it every day. So mm-hmm. even if I couldn't work on the jellyfish book some days because I was doing other work, I kept a jelly journal. And some days I just wrote in the journal, I can't work on my jellyfish book today. But I started being quite disciplined about like taking it seriously. Like, this is gonna be a book, or at least a book proposal, and really committing to it. And so I got to the point of, after about, I want to say it took me a full year, or maybe even more, probably 18 months to get to the point of having a book proposal. Mm. And I'd done some travel, like I'd gone to Alabama, I'd gone to meet a paleontologist in Colorado, and I'd gone out to the West Coast and gone to Monterey Bay and San Francisco and met with some scientists there as parts of like family trips. Mm-hmm. So I had some stuff written, and I put together a proposal, and then I started asking friends who had books if I could send the proposal to their agents. And I kept getting I had a pitch letter, mm-hmm. Which was sort of just 2 paragraphs on what the book was. And I would send the pitch letter to people's agents. And I also cold pitched some agents. And they would all be like, oh, this sounds great. Send me your proposal. And I did. And they'd be like, we love your proposal, but we don't see that there's a market for a book about jellyfish. and that went on for like about another year. So now I'm 2.5 years in. And I was getting sad, but I kept writing it because I really enjoyed writing it. And somehow my proposal fell into the hands of an academic publisher here in Texas at Trinity University Press, which is a really excellent academic press. And the literary director there loved the proposal. And she wanted to buy it and made me an offer. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, my book is actually going to get out into the world. Like, this is fantastic. And so but I reached out to a friend of mine who I knew had published a book, and I said, do you have any on like my contract? And he said, I think you need to talk to an agent. And I said, well, I've been trying to talk to an agent for like a year now, and I can't get one to talk to me. And he's like, I bet you can now. And so he gave me the name of 2 agents, and actually both of them wanted to talk to me now. So I had basically, there was, I don't know, there was blood in the water. An agent gets, just like on a house, the sale of a house, an agent gets 15%. So it's a set price. And one of those agents said, I think this is a commercial book. I think you can sell it to a commercial publisher instead of an academic publisher. And do you want to work on that? And I'm like, yes, that was actually always my vision for this book, because I really always had written it not as an academic book, but as a book, like you said, that my audience was always my sister, who's not at all scientific. Has never read anything scientific, but she's really like smart and curious, and so I was always writing for her. I wanted it to be a book that people who aren't scientists would enjoy. And so I worked with that agent on the proposal, and the proposal, I should say, had gone through many iterations by this point, and it was like 70 pages long. It had probably 4 chapters in it, and a full a really strong chapter by chapter outline. And so we worked on the proposal for like a couple weeks, and then it sold really quickly.
Amazing.
So that's kind of the whole story.
What's the impact that you've seen from the publication of your book?
What kind of impact do you mean?
So have you noticed, I don't know, has the scientific community kind of like reached out to you with more information? Or people kind of regarding you as the jellyfish expert? Like what?
Yeah. I mean, I do get asked to be kind of a jellyfish expert sometimes, but I think there's better ones out there. Someone who, if you're interested in jellyfish science, Rebecca Helm, I think her Twitter is open ocean exploration, something. But anyway, you can find Rebecca Helm is doing an amazing job as a jellyfish communicator right now. She has fantastic Twitter following, and she posts all these incredible things. In fact, yesterday, I'm not sure if you guys saw it, but you should go look. The Schmidt expedition, they're like a big underwater expedition group. They found a siphonophore, which is a jellyfish colony, kind of like the Portuguese man of war. Okay, this thing is a galaxy. It's a spiral. It's holding itself in a spiral, and the outer ring of the spiral is 154 feet.
Oh my God.
And yeah, I mean, and it looks like it's floating on some sort of like pycnocline, which is like a density layer in the deep ocean. It usually siphonophores, when deep sea vehicles see them, they get like twisted and torn up and all out of position. This one is just holding it's the most beautiful thing ever. Anyway, Rebecca is always posting and commenting on crazy cool jellyfish. So
very cool.
That's not an answer to your question. I think the biggest impact for me was that I was able to sell a book on coral rather easily to my same publisher, and which is sort of my dream. Like, remember when I worked on coral back in grad school in that swimming pool. And so I think I've always wanted to write a book on coral. And so now I have that incredible opportunity.
And that's coming out next year, 2021, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
I'm excited for that one. I love corals. It's one of my favorite ocean creatures, and I really enjoyed Spineless, so I'm excited for your next book.
Thank you. This one's a hard one to write. Coral are in rough shape right now.
I'm sure. And aren't you traveling a lot for this book as well? I mean, you just said you went to the DR for it.
Yes, and I went to Indonesia and I saw the biggest coral restoration project in the world, which is amazing. Actually, the Mars Candy Bar Company has created that restoration, which is kind of unexpected. And I was supposed to be in Australia right now, but yeah.
But COVID.
Hopefully that trip will be rescheduled.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I have to have you back on and chat more about corals, which we didn't get into it all today. So 2 more questions before I let you go. I always like to leave the audience with a conservation ask, and you had a really great one about how my audience can kind of get more involved with climate, which we chatted a little bit about in this episode.
Yeah. Okay. So for me, interestingly enough, like the biggest issue for the oceans is, in my opinion, it's climate change. The oceans have taken up a disproportionate amount of the heat that we've added to our atmosphere, because of back to the whole carbon dioxide in the atmosphere issue. So 93% of the heat that carbon dioxide holds has already gone into the oceans. And so the oceans are warming at an alarming pace, and that has huge impacts for lots of things, but particularly coral, because I'm sure when coral warm a couple degrees for a couple weeks, they bleach and they lose the algae that feed them sugar, that live like a photosynthetic tattoo in their tissues. And when they bleach, they weaken, they start starving, and if it goes on too long, they die. And every coral reef in the world has been impacted by bleaching already. The Great Barrier Reef is currently undergoing its most extensive bleaching of all time, and it's the 3rd bleaching in the last 5 years. So what we do up here on land matters extraordinarily a lot. And I was always kind of, I always felt like, well, I have an electric car, I have wind power in my house, but like, these are just drops in the bucket. And that is sort of a hard place to be. And then I found this group called Citizens Climate Lobby, and their the whole thing that they are about is putting a price on carbon dioxide pollution. And I love the idea behind what they stand for, which is called carbon fee and dividend. So the idea is that you would basically put a fee on carbon at the point of extraction, which is like where the oil companies pump it out of the ground or the coal companies dig it out of the ground. Those people who do that have to pay. And they pay, it's very set. It's $15 a ton, going up $5 a ton for the first 5 years, or until you get to $40 a ton, which is basically the amount that we should be charging people to extract carbon dioxide or carbon. It's not carbon dioxide till we burn it. And then what happens is those revenues, those fees get collected by the government and then redistributed to taxpayers on a per capita basis. So every person gets an equal share, every taxpayer gets an equal share, and children get half share. And that disbursement offsets any increases in electrical prices that people will experience by putting a price on carbon. But the idea, it's interesting. I think there's something like 500 economists, including like 30 Nobel Prize winning economists, who've signed on to this idea of carbon fee and dividend. It's something that people on the left and the right can support because it doesn't grow the government, which is a strong issue that conservatives have with with increasing taxes. And it doesn't increase regulation. It just kind of says, look, carbon dioxide is a pollutant. Let's charge people for polluting like we do with all other kinds of pollutants, and then let the market figure out how it wants to respond to that. So it doesn't grow the government in terms of regulation. It just puts a fee in it. So what's really also interesting is British Columbia has had a carbon fee and dividend for the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's gone really well. Their carbon emissions are down. Their economy, I mean, now we're sort of in this COVID crisis, but aside from that, their economy has done just fine using carbon fee and dividend. And if we could get that passed here in the United States, it would change everything. So there's a bill in Congress that Citizens Climate Lobby has advanced. It's in the House, and it was sponsored. It's a bipartisan support, so there's Republicans and Democrats on it. It's HR 573. And so what I do is I write to my congresspeople and I ask them to support that bill. I write op-eds in the local newspaper here in Austin and talk about carbon fee and dividend, and I write letters to the editor whenever I can, also talking about carbon fee and dividend just to get the word out. And so, yeah, my ask is that if you're interested in this kind of thing, Citizens Climate Lobby really helped me learn how to write op-eds and letters to the editor and to make appointments with my congresspeople. And if you feel like this is a place you'd like to get involved, I'd urge you to check out Citizens Climate Lobby because they're really great resource. And I think that the idea of carbon fee and dividend is a game changer.
It's wonderful. I really like that you can do this from anywhere too. You don't have to be by the ocean.
Yeah, right.
Anywhere you live.
Right.
Well, where can the audience find you if they want to learn more about you and your books? My
website is www.juli, and it's just Juli, Berwald, BERWALD.com. And there's a lot of my writing. I occasionally add to my blog there. I update it with events, places where I'm speaking.
I'll put a link to that and everything that we've chatted about today in the show notes. It'll be marinebio.life.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, Juli, this has been so much fun. I feel like there's so much more I wanted to chat with you about, so we might have to have you back on the show. But thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's been such fun. Thank you for asking me to dive deep into all these questions. I don't talk about it very often, so it was really cool. And yeah, and I'm available. There's a contact page on my website if anyone wants to reach out.
Hey, do you want to help the oceans? Have you considered a career in marine biology, but maybe just aren't sure where to start? Head on over to my website, marinebio.life, and subscribe to my newsletter. When you subscribe, you'll receive a free PDF download where you'll learn the 7 steps to becoming a marine biologist without the degree. Thank you for listening to today's show. I'd love to hear any insight you've gleaned. Leave a comment in the show notes or send me an email over at marinebio.life. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a review and of course, share with your friends. If you want more resources for ocean news, including conservation topics and careers, plus personal insight from me that I just don't share anywhere else, join me at marinebio.life and sign up for email updates. Keep after your dreams and making waves in your community. One person can make a difference. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you next time on the So You Want to Be a Marine Biologist podcast.